This is part 3 of a sequence of quick tips we're doing on my creative process. And we're doing that because one of our subscribers asked for it. Well, not only just one, but there have been several people along the way that keep asking that question. Well, we see your quick tips, but how do you go about your own work? So I've tried to do just that in this sequence to show you my process. This one, we're going to do the block in. There are many approaches to block in. For me, block in means setting or placing the colors and the values. That's all it means to me. Other artists have different approaches to block in, but the request was for my process, so that's what I want to show you. And when I do this, I always start with the shadow areas. And the reason I do that is because my work is based primarily on what the light is doing. Whatever happens in the work, what the light is doing is the most important thing. And so I always like to have that shadow area in there first, because that shows the structure of the entire scene or the entire composition. In the previous quick tip, I went through how I go about selecting my colors. And in this quick tip, I have all my colors already laid out the way I lay out colors. Now, I like again, there's a difference in my approach with a lot of other painters. In my approach, I like to have a few pre-mixes just in the color, the local colors I'm seeing I'm going to need, and that sequence I talked about in the previous quick tip for how I make the decisions about controlling or changing those colors and giving variations on them. I have my value line, or actually value color lines, here on the palette already, and you will recognize, I'll quickly go through it, you'll recognize the colors that I discovered in the previous quick tip and said that I would use. So this is really a value color line, and what I'm doing here in this one, don't always do it, depends on what the reference is doing, but what I'm doing there is I'm creating a sequence that goes dark to light, but it also changes in color the way I see the colors changing here according to what the light and shadow are doing. And so this is the Rembrandt Transparent Oxide Red, and have gradated it with the cadmium red light to about this middle area here, middle value, and the red orange. It leans a little bit more towards red there. Then into this, when I started adding just the yellow to gradate on up into the lighter yellow orange, or potential for yellow oranges I'm seeing there. And so that's what that is. This is a straight value line. This is the Rembrandt Viridian that I have in a value line that goes from the darkest dark, not to the lightest light, but just to a lighter value that is as close to the value range of this light as I felt, as I could see it. And then I explained in that quick tip what the purpose of this one. And then this is the ultramarine blue, which is just a straight value line. So if you want to know more about how I come up with the value lines, we have a quick tip 130. I go through the whole process of setting up a value line, so you can watch that one if you're really interested in this process. But for this one, I want to go ahead and just show you how I go about doing a block in. So I'll always begin in the shadow. Now, this photo has the shadow way overexposed. Many photos will. And if you're just working from photos, we always need to take that in consideration. You don't want your painting to look like it was a copy from a photo. Not just that, but in order to get that a truer representation of what shadow's doing. So I know that this shadow's not going to be that dark, but what I want to do is within this area when I have indicated shadow, and all these areas where I've indicated shadow, I'm going to place values and colors that are close to what that will be in the final painting, or where that's going, or where I observe it. I'll use this as my guide. There's no guesswork here. I use that as my guide. And I'll begin right here. And I'm just beginning with a value, a dark value, and the color that I feel that will best translate that. And I don't try to form it so much here. You'll see some variation in value because I'll reach over into this darker one now. I don't try to form that. I just simply try to place it, although I will often use the brush strokes that move in the direction, because that's just a habit I've developed of using the brush strokes that move in the direction of the whatever the images are that I'm seeing there. And you see here I'm moving back and forth. And one other thing about blocking, the paint needs to be relatively scarce. I'm not going to say thin because I don't use any medium or any thinner at all when I'm placing colors. But the block in does need to be relatively scant as to the amount of paint that goes on, although it needs to cover the surface. We don't need that to be so thick that when we go back in to refine, we can't work with it. Now, I want to get this a little bit darker as it goes to the back side there. In order to do that, I'll come back to the complement of the red-orange, which is the blue-green, and by just adding a little bit of that complement in there, I can actually darken, you see there? I can actually darken, and it also reduces the saturation back in darken, so I just give that a little bit more indication of darker on the back side of that, and that places that. Now also I'm seeing that a little bit more of that up here and as it comes down there, but this is block in, so I'm not trying to form it. I'll move on now. As I move up into the shadow area here, I still keep that very, very dark. In fact, you see that that shadow area doesn't have, we don't see a lot of variation on that shadow area here, so I'll need to add that variation more when I reach in the next quick tip, when I'll be doing what I call refinement. Here we see this shadow area going a little bit more towards red. In other words, it's moving, it's picking up just a little bit more light. We can see it a little bit more, and also we have that hue of the red cone. And so I will I register that as being about this value right here. I just move a little bit more into the red or into this value area, which also happens to emphasize the redness, the character of the hue of red there. And then you see as this comes on over, all these remain in shadow, so I keep those very, very dark, and just simply lay those colors in. And then you see as it gets down here, it begins to get even redder. So it's moving a little bit more towards that middle value area as it works its way down here. So I just allow this to guide me as to how the hue is changing and how the value is changing and how the saturation is changing, where we see saturation changing. Usually in this block, usually in the shadow areas, I won't be picking up any white, but I might be picking up mixtures that have the white in them down here if I need that. So I see that here we're getting a little bit more light, with reflective light within that shadow, pulling a little bit more of that red out. So I'll throw that in right there. And so just continue like that in that block in. And then here as I move on down into this area, in here I see that that is very, very dark on that wattle part right here, very, very dark. The shadow part is very, very dark. We have a translucent quality back there, so we can see a little bit more of that red coming through within that shadow area in there. And so I just simply allow this to guide me, allow what I'm seeing in terms of color and value to guide me as I move on into interpreting this. as I get into the shadow area that we're seeing there on the beak, that also changes hue. So I'll add some blue back into that and lean that hue a little bit more. It changes more towards changes more towards, well, actually it changes more in intensity, but it changes a little bit more towards that the yellow that's in the red orange. And that's, so what I'll do here is I'll just simply add the blue in order to lean that a little bit more towards that. So there we go there, and you see that makes that a little bit darker, and that makes it easier to handle there by doing that. And just a little bit there for that. Just a little bit more to go on blocking in the shadow and on the bird itself. And whenever I rinse my brush, I got to be sure I get all that solvent out of the brush, because if I don't, by the way, this, I'm using oils here for those that need to know that. But you don't want ever to have solvent in the brush when you're trying to control the colors and the values like this. Now, as I see just a little bit more of indication of shadow in here, and then you see I've left that no tan I have underneath there guide me as I'm moving along through catching these major shadows. Moving into the negative area, which is the background space, the shadows in there belong in the block in as well. Now what we see in those shadows there, they're very, very neutral. And what we'll see there is this is where the blue-green can come into play within the red-orange. So this is a shadow area. And what I'm doing is I'm using that blue-green just to desaturate. You see how the blue-green actually desaturates that red-orange. In fact, I have used just a little too much, so I want not quite desaturate that. There we go. So that it changes, it takes the red out of it and causes it to go more neutral. So I wanted that, I want to get that indication of some shadow back there. And so I will do that then, just use the blue-green and the red-orange, adding the blue-green to the red-orange, desaturate for that shadow value. Now the shadow in the distance there does help define part of that cone right here, and part of the beak right here. And so there we go, like that. So now I will then, the rest of that is out of focus. All that background's out of focus. I would assume that perhaps it may be wintertime and there may be trees back there. I don't know, there's not any green foliage, so we're assuming that we don't know what's going on back there. So in that case, we would just have to do a background pattern, which would end up feeling more like background than it does environment. So I just want to keep that, I want to get enough of that shadow interpretation in there in order to indicate that as a part of the composition. So just get that in there. Adding a little, just each time getting a little bit more variations of that desaturated color in there. And okay, and then we have a little bit of that shadow area over here. Now that will get refined in the next step, and we kind of make more sense. But just wanted, let me just close that light out right there. Just wanted to get a pattern going here that can indicate something of what's going on there. Once I have the shadow area pretty much placed, where the shadow colors are, where the shadow values are, once I have those pretty much placed, then I'll go in. This is very general. It's a very general placement. You might call it kind of some people would call it underpainting. For me, it's block in, is setting the stage for what's going to happen in the final painting itself. So then I'll move from shadow to what I call not in shadow, and I begin to get in those areas that are not in shadow. And you'll find down here now on my value line, there's sort of a demarcation right here. The colors that appear on that side of the value line from the middle value onto the lights are not in shadow values, are not in shadow colors. So I'll begin to move now into those, and if I want that just a little bit desaturated, I'll add just a little bit more. See, I come into the complement, the blue-green of that, that's at that same value level, and that's why I love the value line, because it enables me then to move in that value line in order to change the hues and change the saturation. So I just don't want that I don't get that in too saturated now, but I want to keep it pretty much in that same value range, and so I'll just move along in this direction of that value line and just lay in those colors. I'm just going to lay them in very quickly now. This is what I see as general color range where the light's hitting that rooster, and that's what I want to go in there. Just get that in. Now you can see that I use kind of a scrubbing motion there, and that's a good way to block in, is just with a scrubbing motion or stroking, depending on what the subject is. But I'm just going to go ahead now because I want to get this in quickly, and I want to keep that desaturated. I don't want it as saturated as I might see it there. Now it begins to move, alternate between light and shadow there, and so what I'll do there is I will just have a sort of a middle value area within that as a transition, because that is it's curving shape, is curving around, and so to have light to middle to dark as we would see it there if it weren't for that if it weren't for the overexposure of the camera, that's exactly what we would see there. And so we will just do that. Now as I'm moving up in here, I just want to place those like, now that ended up being a little bit too saturated for a block in, and so I don't like to have the block-in colors fully saturated, even though I might be seeing them fully saturated, because I like to control that saturation in the finished part, in the refinement. Now if I squint at this part, I see that the color changes there. The character of the color changes, and it changes in a way that I know that red-orange changes if I add white to it. And then so I will just bring just a tiny bit of white. A lot of people call that chalky, but sometimes the color is actually more chalky. And let's see if I don't have that very, very close there. I might have over-chalked it. Add a little bit more of that color back in. And we'll just, all right, there we go. See the character of that changed? It changed to more of a feeling of kind of opaque red or red-orange in there. So that's what I'm doing there. You see that change. And now, of course, I'm just laying the foundation, as I said before. And we'll do the same thing right here. Just enough of it there. And I'm not even going to, I'm not going to place eye quite yet. Now, and the other thing I'll do there, simply give a little bit of a placement. I'll go back right over here where let's go down in here, where I change that. Now I'll come up into the white just a little bit here, and pull it down in here to kind of give me a block in for the light part of that. And the reason I did that is because this desaturated, the blue here desaturated, but also helped cool and lean more towards that very, very desaturated red, or rather than the red, orange, etc. Just adding white to that mixture, then you see will give me what I need there. So that's all I'll do right there. I don't think I need to take that any further. I'm going to rinse the brush out really, really good. And now here I want to block this in. This is very desaturated. There, as the light, as I said in the previous quick tips, is coming from right here. It's catching right there. It's actually behind that kind of a translucent type light. I want to interpret that, but I don't want it to be quite that saturated. So what I'm going to do, and also I see that has a different character of red. So what I'll do there, I'm going to add a touch of white to that, and just a touch of it, like that, and block that in. There we go. Now you see that's very saturated. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of this blue at the same value level, and lean that a little bit more towards There we go. A little bit more towards desaturation and violet. The blue will also desaturate the orange that's in that red orange, and that helps to pull that a little bit more towards that red we're seeing. So what color does the color? It's very important. It's not just what you pull out of the tube, but what you do with what you pull out of the tube in the way of responding to what you know about what color does to color is going to enable you to know how to make those kinds of decisions that you see me making here. Now, let me just pull that right down there. Oh, I see that goes down further. That part goes down a little bit further. And so I will do that here. Just take that a little bit further there. And then, of course, we have that milkier part of the wattle sort of showing over here. And so I'll just make that, add a little tiny bit more white. Tiny bit. So white doesn't just raise the value, it also can change the character of the colors, especially the reds and the oranges. And so just there, you see the difference in those two characters of color. Pull that in like that. And that gives a nice blocking. And what I'll do now, I'm going to pull quite a bit of white down here in this more neutral pile. Let's pull this a little bit right there, just right there. You see now, as I work on my palette, it gets disorganized, and it gets the colors get kind of mushed up. Well, that's what happens to palettes, and sometimes we stop and clean them, and sometimes we don't, depending on where we are in the stage of the painting. But I just want to kind of rough in very, very generally. Rough in very generally. Get a little bit more of that blue-green in there. What would be the block in for the lightest lights? And let's get that a little bit. There we go. I wanted that just a little bit cooler than I had. I wanted it a little cooler than what was there, but I don't want that cool. There we go. That's more like it right there. So I'll just pull this in here now, and I'm just going to kind of scrub this in very generally. Very generally. Block-ins are supposed to be ugly. Sometimes somebody will do a block-in that, you know, really speaks, but usually a block-in is going to be ugly. And you're not looking for a pretty ugly or anything else here. You're simply looking for where you place the colors, and how you have those colors relating to each other. And so as long as the colors and the values are in the general ballpark of what you're seeing, or of what you want to do with what you're seeing, that's what block-in does. It simply places color. And I consider that when the all the canvas is covered with paint, block-in is finished. And so that's just about, too much green there. It's got too big of a hurry there. That can happen. We need to not rush. There we go. That's better. Okay, let's just, I'm just going to generally throw that in. And see now, does that give me, I need a little bit more, pulling a little bit more of that red in there. Does that give me now the, if I squint, does that give me the values and the colors underneath? I may see some other things too, but does that give me the values that I'm looking at, and does it give me the colors I'm looking at? So let's see, pull that a little bit more down like that, and let's pull this one more in here like that. And I think maybe that. Now I lean back, stand back, and if I have the values seeing here that translate what the light and shadow are doing, if I have generally the colors, color areas I'm seeing, then I know that my block-in is ready for me to go into the refinement, which is what the next quick tip will be about. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, Click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.